Welcome to the Private AI Lab, the podcast where we experiment, explore, and debate the future of AI behind the firewall. I'm your host, Johan, and every month I have a guest in the lab to break down real-world use cases, challenges, and innovations shaping private AI. In this episode, Andrew Morgan from Aria will join me to talk about the topic of vibe coding. So, enjoy the episode. So, welcome to the show, Andrew. For people who don't know you, we've known each other for quite a while now. I think the first time we met was probably, 10 years ago. Both still working in the field of end-user computing, digital workspace stuff. But yeah, who is Andrew now, and what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Andrew, yeah, we definitely. I mean, I want to say older than 10 years ago, but I'm in Denver showing our age, right? I spent, I'm a software developer, have been for 2 decades now. Spent a lot of time consulting and doing UC work, but in the last 2 years, I found myself working in an AI startup called Aria. My current job title is I'm a principal AI engineer, and I'm building out kind of enterprise grade AI workflows and systems. By day, enterprise AI, and by night, I'm still the same tinkerer that I was 10, 15 years ago in my little home lab. But now I have a new companion.
Yeah, so and that's cool. That's definitely the one topic that we're going to talk about today because, like you mentioned, you've been a software developer for 2 decades now. So that's one. Then you transitioned from working at VMware into and your own company and into an AI company right now. And you are very opinionated on the topic of vibe coding. So I thought let's combine everything into a single episode. And before we dive into the trenches, let's start with the icebreaker, section 1 of the show. And I love to know from you, since you've been in the AI, the AI space a while now, what the biggest AI fail is that you've ever seen.
It's a great question. I love it because obviously our social media feeds are littered with these things right now. But I think intrinsically we need to look at there are 2 components to every AI fail. There's the AI itself, and then there's the human who prompted it to do such travesties. So, do you want to where should we start? Do you want to cover AI, or do you want to cover human?
Let's dive into both. I mean, I think you maybe have 2 awesome stories to share.
Okay, so let's start with the human. Fundamentally, the biggest and largest AI fail I see with humans is what I like to call the sunken cost fallacy of working with AI. You prompt it to do things, it does those things. You maybe don't tell it exactly what you want, and then you don't get the result you want. And then next thing you know, you're about 2 hours deep, you've burned through a ton of tokens, and you're spinning your wheels, just like in an American casino, pulling on that slot machine, hoping for that big payday. So the sunken cost fallacy is one of the largest human failures I see with AI. You have to know when to stop, and you have to know when you've succeeded in the task that you're doing. The other largest AI human failure I've seen is the overconfidence that it provides non-technical expertise in a technical expertise domain. So quite often people will speak with great confidence about what should be done, or how their opinions are formed on a topic provided by AI. But what I often call it is confidently incorrect. What the AI told you to what you asked it versus what is actually happening in the real world is often quite different. So human failure 99% of the time is to do with really not understanding what you're trying to achieve, and then just keep chomping away at tokens to get to the end. AI itself, I've seen AI do some pretty wild things. I've seen AI redefine its own boundaries in coding standards. So like the AI, you've asked it to try to achieve something, it's struggling with testing or linting, or it's struggling with some kind of external boundary. It just removes it. It just says, you know what, you don't need your linting tests anymore in your enterprise product. We're just going to push this straight into the main branch. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And it will do that. Another example was a customer who wrote a rogue agent, was looping over a data set of 7 files, wrote the loop wrong, and overnight generated a $32,000 bill, OCRing the exact same document over and over again because they weren't iterating their loop. You'd think the AI would have picked that up, but no, it went for it. And finally, a little more kind of human and AI loop was it's very topical with this Claude bot, or I don't even know what it's calling itself anymore.
Claude?
OpenClaw or whatever it is. The concept of having AI autonomously respond to prompts and actions. But the danger is putting it inside of your personal context. And by personal context, I mean access to your stuff, access to your messages, access to your email. We've been doing this for a year and a half, but it's. I'll give you an example. A very good buddy of mine, Igor, in one of the best researchers I've ever worked with, based out of Bulgaria, set up a Slack bot, and every message that was sent to him would go into this bot. But it didn't take us long to realize that it was running in this context. So next thing you know, we had his Slack bot sending emails out to other people in the company with jokes, emailing the CEO of the company, asking him how he was, just wreaking havoc before he could figure out what had happened, because all of these things happen silently until the user catches up with them. So yeah, those are the biggest fails I've seen so far, but we're only 2 years into this. Things are going to get so much funnier.
Is this the closest we got before Skynet starts?
I think the context window limitations are a great thing right now. AI can only do so much, and we tend to poison that context window exponentially, so we limit its exposure. A lot of the tooling that enterprise uses today, Graph, etc., haven't really caught on to AI tooling yet. So I think we're limited right now by industry ability. But yes, autonomous agents are here. They're like we're building them internally. They are doing some pretty wild things, and we can cover that another topic. But yes, Skynet is coming, my friend.
Yeah. So today's topic is vibe coding. And first of all, you kind of gave it away in the introduction, but still, I'd like to know what your link is to vibe coding. And another thing is that, if you need to mention what vibe coding is in one sentence, how would you do that?
So vibe coding at its core is, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be software. Vibe coding is explaining to an AI model the task that you want to achieve and handling it in a different way to a standard LLM conversation that you would have with ChatGPT or with Claude. Vibe coding is telling it it's taking action and doing it. And that could be writing code, it could be creating a project plan, it could be interacting with external systems. And as vibe coding evolves, it's becoming less about prompt in, prompt out. It's now becoming about swarms. So you start with what is required of your agent. The agent sets the boundaries of what it's going to do. And now it's breaking things down into sub-processes, almost like a project manager. It creates projects, it creates milestones, it creates tasks, and it delegates these things. And it's a little like Jesus is taking the wheel, because while the human operator is watching what is happening, when you have 10 agents running at the same time, we just do not have the mental capacity to track that in real time. So that is what vibe. I know that was a very long sentence, but the point I'm trying to make is vibe coding is a lot of things to a lot of people, but fundamentally, it's here is your process, go and figure it out.
So it demands a serious amount of trust, I guess, into something.
Trust or guidance. I mean, you don't know. I mean, these coding agents do have certain guardrails put around them. Tool access, tool security, sandboxing is used by a lot of companies as well for this. And if it makes a mess, which inevitably it does, it's your choice then whether to start again or carry on. So yeah, it can make a mess, but I think if you limit the blast radius for trust, it becomes more about how productive was this session.
So you mentioned tooling, which is a great segue into the second section of the show. Let's go into the deep dive. And obviously, like, you're not vibe coding in a notebook or in a, how do you call it, like a text editor. So we actually need tooling. And what I'm really interested in to hear from you is, what kind of tooling are you using for vibe coding right now? And are those kind of the same tools that are shaping the concept of vibe coding?
Yeah, I think when you talk about vibe coding, I mean, fundamentally, you can't start or stop this topic without talking about Claude Code. Claude Code was the original kind of catalyst of this. Where it would autonomously take control of whatever you were doing and start making modifications. So, of course, Cursor and GitHub Copilot existed in the IDE, and that's kind of vibe coding. But to me, vibe coding is the actual autonomous process of kicking these things off. I use obviously working in an AI company, I use a suite of products. Where, depending on the task at hand, if I'm out walking the dog, I'm talking to ChatGPT and I'm validating technical designs or pulling out requirements or documenting my thought process for an ask from a PM. From there, I'm once I finish the conversation, I'm telling ChatGPT to summarize it and hand it over to a code bot. Once I've summarized that, I've got some personal MCP servers I use to summarize my ChatGPT sessions and put them into a Kanban board I wrote for myself for my agents. And then my Claude loop that I wrote myself will take those tasks and start building them. And Claude Code is my tool of choice 99% of the time. My company provides me with the Teams plan. There's not enough tokens in a day for that thing. So what I'm paying for right now is the Claude Max plan. So I've got ChatGPT, the Plus plan just for the chit chat, some personal stuff. Claude, I'm on the Max plan for vibe coding and for using Claude, in anger. If Claude goes down, which can't happen, I'll switch over to Gemini.
So as a sole contributor, I can imagine having your own tool set really makes sense, but how does that work when working in a team? Like, if you have a team that works in a sprint towards a certain feature, you work with a product owner and different developers, maybe an architect. Do you see that the similar way of working would fit into a team construction?
100%. No, absolutely 100%. But the paradigms of those teams have shifted with vibe coding. And we'll talk more about this later. But it's no longer the engineers who are just writing software. The engineer is the easiest part of an engineer's job is always writing the code. That wasn't the tricky bit. It was pulling the story out of the PM, understanding all of the side requirements, understanding the architecture of the product you're working in and the ramifications of those decisions. So when it comes to traditional software planning, PM writes stories, developers develop the solution. They still need to do that pre-work. They still need to figure out what the requirements are and then go from there. And then once they have a good idea in their head as to what they want to achieve with their PR, they will offload much of this to Claude to do the crud work, to wire up the tests, to do everything else. That's how things are working in this paradigm right now. And common tooling that our engineers are writing are becoming either company internal tooling or team specific tooling as well, because teams work on different components of the product.
Yeah, it's a like you mentioned, a paradigm shift, and I think, and this is also one of the topics I definitely wanted to talk to you about, is that, uh, I'm nowhere as close to how you act as a developer or being a developer. I write my own tools, I do stuff, but I used to copy a shit ton of code from Stack Overflow. And talking about paradigm shift, what we've been seeing is, as soon as vibe coding took off, like the number of page views on Stack Overflow has become from, I don't know, millions a day to zero, like nothing. Stack Overflow is obsolete. So is vibe coding kind of the new pair programming, or is it kind of the new copy paste from Stack Overflow methodology? Like, how do you see that?
So, like, the Stack Overflow, I mean, vibe coding isn't really a new thing, right? Or at least learning. If you're using vibe coding as a tool to learn how to write software, vibe coding isn't really a new thing. I mean, we've all, particularly you and I in this industry, like we've been using Google, Stack Overflow, many other tools over the years to, I have a problem. This is what I need to solve. I'll end up on Stack Overflow. I'll probably find a piece of code. I'll copy and paste that into an IDE. But here's the critical piece. I'll then debug it. I'll then run it, and I'll understand what that code has done. And then from there, if it doesn't achieve, it's rinse and repeat, right? Google, Stack Overflow, understand the error, debug the error message. That's why the original approach to this was a little more human centric, or at least it gave us the ability to learn as we progressed using tools like Stack Overflow. We had to understand what we were putting on paper, and there was a requirement of initiative and energy on the person who was trying to learn to write software to go through this process. It's not, the human is not going to do it as fast as an AI, but fundamentally, when the human hands off all of this learning and experience to a vibe coding LLM, they're missing the internal interpretation of what that piece of code does, and are they really growing as engineers? So ultimately, vibe coding skips understanding. Stack Overflow forced understanding to a certain degree.
Yeah, and we both. So I started my career as a software developer back in '99, and there wasn't something like code completion. So you had to write every single piece of code, every single character yourself. And later on, IDEs got smarter, and code completion with suggestions was released, and it already saved you a ton of time. But now this feels like code completion is steroids. But with it's not like AI, like you mentioned in the introduction. Why certain stuff fails when bad prompts are being submitted is because, and many people don't look at AI like this, but it is just a prediction of the next word. Like, you send a prompt, you get a result, a completion back, and the completion is just a set of words of which the AI thinks that this is word 1. I'll put word 2 after that because the chances are extremely big that this is the right word. It's just that. Whereas,
well, there's a little more. I mean, obviously, there's the word prediction and word following, but then you've also got a mixture of experts where the model is choosing which expert to leverage. But you are fundamentally right. Yeah. I mean, to 99% of people, what we're talking about right now is an absolute black box. They don't know. Yeah. They don't care. They just want the result.
So looking at the black box, who is most aggressively using that right now? Do you think it's junior developers, senior developers? I don't know. It's people prototyping, product owners. Who are those people?
So, I mean, I think everybody's using it. Right, I think absolutely everybody is using it unless there's a company mandate not to. And even if there's a company mandate not to, there's nothing stopping them from taking their phone out and running it through ChatGPT or anything else. So I mean, if we accept that, a large majority of people are doing this today, and we accept that in the next 6 to 9 months, a further majority will join that group that are using LLMs as peers, as sounding boards, as rubber ducks, and as workers to assist with their day-to-day life. I think the from a landscape perspective, everybody is doing it, but how they're doing it is intrinsically the most important thing. When it comes to vibe coding for non-devs versus real engineers, and then even junior engineers as well, which we can talk about, for somebody who has no developer experience, has an idea, and they want to create a prototype, vibe coding is amazing. It feels like magic. Like there's this terminology in the gaming industry, lightning in a bottle, where something just grabs you and it's just right, and it wows you. Vibe coding is brilliant for that. You can go from point to point, and you get a great demo production or a demo POC. You can show what's in your head to that person, and for non-devs and juniors, you can follow that. You can let Jesus take the wheel, and that'll happen, right? But for skilled engineers and skilled prompters and skilled people in their particular domain of knowledge, it's an accelerator, not a do everything. So that was kind of a long way of going around the question, but I think fundamentally everybody is using these technologies. But the value they're getting out is largely down to the topic that they're working on and their broad understanding of that.
So is it democratizing development or just lowering the bar to, turn your imagination into something usable?
I think to a certain, there's nothing in software development that was stopping anybody from learning how to write software before vibe coding came along. But is it democratizing creating features in products? It depends on the guardrails that are put in place by the company. If vibe coders are encouraged to add and contribute to a code base, contribute to features, then absolutely, it's democratizing that. But there are some key points you need to make along those ways. When you are democratizing development and allowing them to contribute to a code base that is what is a product that's making you money, and that you're giving them the ability to potentially break or change the behavior of your product, it all comes down to the guardrails and the structure that is put in place by the developers who ultimately hold the code base. Accountability is the single most important thing when it comes to enterprise for vibe coding, when you start to allow non-software developers interact in the software development workspace. And you should. It all comes down to the level of energy that they're willing to put in and how much they're willing to learn. Vibe coding as a junior engineer or as somebody who's never even written software before is all down to how lazy you're going to be. Are you going to be lazy and you're going to not understand what you're doing? Or are you going to do this, learn it, and then use your knowledge to further empower yourself? And it all comes down to that accountability piece. Where is the vibe coder at 4 a.m. in the morning when there's a production outage and the engineers are drinking coffee and crying into their cornflakes? They're nowhere to be found, right? Because they don't understand what they're after doing. They don't understand the ramifications of what they're after doing. And you see this as well when it comes to traditional software development. You make your changes, the code is reviewed by somebody else, probably a senior or somebody else in the team to ensure that you're on track, and then it gets shipped. For vibe coders, it can sometimes feel like you're talking through an interpreter, and it's very frustrating. They raise their changes, they submit them for review. An engineer who's already busy now doing everything that they were doing on top of vibe coding, because that's the expectation, we're now even busier, are now going to review these pull requests, and there may be some logic in there that we just don't fully understand. The code has done something, there's no intent behind it, and it doesn't follow a standard practice. It might cause a problem. What was the intent here? You ask the question. And they're like a deer in the headlights. They're like, oh, don't ask me to. I don't know. I'm just going to ask Claude and hope Claude remembers. And it's absolutely democratizing things, but it's the accountability piece that people really need to understand if you want to write a product that you can sell.
I think there's a couple of things that you definitely hit the nail on the head. So first of all, I always like mock or I work at ITQ. We have a ton of engineers, great engineers, and one of the things about I think a great engineer is that he or she doesn't want to do repetitive task twice. Like so, they do something once. If they have to do it the second time, they'll fully automate it. So, and we don't call that lazy, we call that efficient. Whereas when talking about vibe coding right now, if someone is lazy, they're actually lazy. They don't want to learn Python. They don't want to learn how to use Git, use a coding practice, learn about the 12 factors of a decent app, learn about what it means to build a cloud native app. They just want to get to the result as fast as possible. And if they see a result, it's fine.
Oh,
until
absolutely.
it's not.
So
Until
I
it's
love
not.
that. I love that analogy. I remember Hal Klein threw that at me about 15 years ago about, the best developers are lazy developers, but not all lazy developers are brilliant. Or sorry, the best engineers are lazy, but not all lazy engineers are brilliant. And um, in the old paradigm, that meant that they did something, they understood what they did, they realized that it was time consuming, and now they're going to try to automate it. But you know as well as I do that graph, right? That's I think it was an XKCD graph where I'm going to
Yeah.
automate this now and I'm going to save all this time, and then they end up spending more time automating it than they would have done
Yeah.
in doing it 10 times manually. Like there's absolutely that too, right? So in previous terms, we understood what we did and we tried to automate it. Now I'm just going to throw this prompt and hope for the best. And yeah, it's an interesting time. I'm curious to see what happens there too.
So you mentioned before in the previous answer a lot around reliability risks. So vibe coding is probably fine. This is a statement. Vibe coding is fine until you have to debug it. Is that to you true or false? And it's a rhetorical question, I guess.
It's absolutely true or false. I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of feeds into the sunk cost fallacy that we spoke about earlier on today, right? Where you ask an app or you ask an LLM to do something for you, it does it. It doesn't work. You don't understand what it's done or why it's not working, so you start feeding error messages into it. And then once you start feeding those error messages in, as you and I know, and your listeners will know as well, that context window is finite. Once that context window starts to fill and conversation compaction kicks in, you lose a lot of the minutiae on what decisions were reached until that point. And then you end up in the pulling the handle with the slot machine scenario where you're just throwing it back. Claude, please fix this. My life depends on it. Claude, this is for a children's hospital. Whatever other ridiculous prompts people put in there to try to get Claude to one-shot these things, they just repeat. And as they repeat, they end up creating more and more tech debt as they go along. And then ultimately they might get the result that they wanted, but they've now created this absolute, what we internally in our area call a crab dragon, where you started off trying to design a crab, but now suddenly it has dragon wings and it breathes fire and it has massive teeth and is bigger than you. Like, you end up creating these massive crab dragons, and you can push that in and hope for the best. But eventually that tech debt, just like in software development, will catch up on you. And it becomes a scenario of, how do I get myself out of this? And it's fine for you if you're doing this for yourself. But it's so frustrating for a software developer to have all of this passed over to them and go, okay, you support this now. And I'm like, no. I don't want to support this. You wrote it. You wrote it badly. It's terrible. I don't want responsibility for this. I'm not waking up at 4 a.m. If you had just asked me to do it, I would have vibe coded it myself, and it would have been a lot better than the slop that has been created. So, like, that fundamentally, it comes down to who is going to debug this. Is it the slot machine puller, or is it the engineer who does not want to debug this because they wouldn't have written it this way themselves if they'd understand the requirements?
So do you think that it would be kind of a mandatory thing for developers who vibe code to have a basic understanding of the principles of DevOps, for instance, know how to deal with CI/CD, know how basic coding principles work. Like, is that a mandatory thing for someone to build something using vibe coding and try to push something into production? Could be mission critical, business critical, or like, I don't know, as soon as other people will touch it. Do you think that is a mandatory thing?
I don't think it's mandatory. No, I think it depends on the vertical. If you are a single founder and you want to build a product and you want to go forward with that, vibe coding isn't just about software development. Like behind me is an agent that runs my K3S cluster. I don't care what's happening in that cluster. I just tell it what to do and it just creates things. And it takes checkpoints. So from a DevOps perspective, I don't care what it's doing. I just know it's linked to GitHub and it deploys things. And I'm okay with that. So for my side projects and fun little things I do, that's absolutely perfect. And it's probably a good analogy of a founder. But when it comes to the enterprise, yes, there is more expectation on you there, because if you're going to interact with people who have been professionally in this market for as long as they have, with the experience that they have, it's a common sense of decency. If you're going to ask for help on something, that you've at least attempted to understand what you're trying to do, and you can try to understand the questions that are coming back to you. So like when that founder vibe codes, they're relying heavily on everything that is going to happen in software land and DevOps land is going to just be Claude generated. But what a senior engineer will do with vibe coding is very, very different. I mean, they understand these principles. They'll break things down into succinct milestones. They will create checkpoints as they go along. The earliest point to test what has been done so far, the unit tests that they associate with these tests so far, and the structure that needs to be followed to go forward. So all of these paradigms work. Everybody can be productive. It's just knowing how to make it.
So, talking about guardrails and productivity, and ensuring that code actually works in a production environment, do you think that looking into the future, it would make more sense to put, for instance, more focus on code reviews and from a human perspective, or complete different AI that is. Like you use Claude, for instance, to build something, but use something completely different to review that, preferably a human. But would you then kind of agree with me that organizations, if they want to use vibe coding to build production apps, should put more focus on, first of all, creating the right guardrails? Like, simple example, use tabs versus spaces. And agree on one of them, but also making sure that whatever is being built with the right guardrails, with the right principles up front, is being reviewed really well.
I mean, as always in these things, like this podcast is going to age like milk, because what the standards will be in 12 months from now versus right now are going to be incredibly different. So, I mean, I suppose right now what we do have is we do have code review agents. We have GitHub Copilot reviewing things. Claude can review code from a GitHub action. They're Coding Rabbit, I believe is the name of the company. They are a dedicated code review service. But I think if we separate the mindset for a minute, so forgetting about individual founders, focusing more on enterprise software development, there are still the quality gates in place, and they still need to remain in place for the foreseeable future. Pull request review, unit tests, integration tests, QA, and then that cyclical process of going around until a feature, because the level of minutia involved in an enterprise product, even if it's just a monolith or it's a distributed system, you can't easily vocalize that to a vibe coded agent to understand the entire footprint before it moves forward. So I think for individual contributors, I think they're going to learn their lessons the hard way when they hit scale, particularly the Python developers. But anyway, when things go to scale, they're going to realize why these gates exist in software development. And for those who are already in the software development process, our engineers are now getting bombarded with pull requests and having to weed through the slop for the diamonds to get the right PRs in for the right reasons. So I think, yes, ultimately, if you want to operate in this space, you have to shift your mindset from vibe coding to vibe learning. And vibe learning is pair programming with that developer, LLM, and understanding what it's doing, working with it. As I mentioned earlier on, talking to ChatGPT, getting a review, talking to Claude, getting another review, finding the perfect match for what you're trying to do, and then testing it. Not just, Jesus, take the wheel, off we go.
A couple of things that you mentioned throughout the episode so far is like, one is that you're using obviously cloud-based vibe coding solutions or cloud-based services like Claude, like ChatGPT to basically build your coding practice, vibe coding practice. One of the challenges I see, especially with customers in the governmental space or in finance, is that they want to keep their code on-prem, preferably in a isolated code repo or in a code repo that's strictly secured. So how is there a place for vibe coding in a private AI strategy?
So you mentioned a really critical and interesting piece. And sorry if this takes us down a tangent, but when it comes to vibe coding, like right now, the best vibe coding solutions are ones that run in the context of an operating system. They're running on your machine. They're using parallel threads for parallel agents. They're intercommunicating with named pipes and RPC. Those are the best coding agents right now because it allows a team of delegates and agents to continue. You'll notice that Claude is currently, and OpenAI Codex are currently teasing towards moving those agents into a more cloud-centric method. And the engineering required there is immense. So when you have processes interacting with each other, like that's easy. This is stuff we've been doing for generations. Process talks to process, shares messages, etc., etc. But when you move to the cloud and you have agents that are running ephemerally somewhere in compute and need to spin up additional agents running somewhere in compute, the communication between those agents, the engineering there is phenomenal. And the reason I link this in is when it comes to your on-prem use case of vibe coding. Yes, absolutely. You'll notice that Claude Code now supports using Olama, which will use local models. We've seen I think it's Charm Crush, which is one of the original coding vibe coding apps that was open source. We've also got Open Code, which you can plug in your own models, and many of these are either you can even run Claude Code through a gateway. So Claude Code can be put through a gateway. That gateway converts Anthropic's messages API into ChatGPT or OpenAI's chat completions API or their responses API, and you can go from there. So, I mean, for developers to integrate Claude on-prem with offline inference models, it's absolutely a thing. And I mean, they can do that right now. The challenge is going to be that the industry is going over here. And once those autonomous agents become available in the cloud for long-running tasks, running under your context with your GitHub principles, running with your own specific auth tokens and become autonomous, the engineering challenge there for on-prem to match is going to be intense. So can on-prem vibe code? Absolutely. The engineering required to do what the cloud vendors are moving towards is going to be immense. and they're not really going to be interested in the on-prem story, I'd imagine.
Yeah, so it's oh, sorry. Yeah, so it's like, if you take it at a small scale, and run some kind of model locally on a laptop, that's probably going to be fine. But yeah, looking at the development and the innovation that the cloud services are undergoing, you'll always feel like going a couple of years, a couple of steps back. Now, like, what about scale? Like, if you would run this at a organization with 1,000 software developers, is there a way you think that you could run this on-prem, on scale, and have LLM inference being still viable for this?
100%. 100%. So how much you're willing to do on-prem is down to how deep your pockets are. The upfront cost of running the GPUs required to do a large context window coding agent are considerable, and the context window is king here. You can easily download a Kimi model or whatever else with a 4K context window and run it on Llama, and you're going to get a great first response. But the minute you flood that context window, it's game over. Hallucinations everywhere. So if you are willing to invest in the compute to run models that can plug into Claude or plug into other coding frameworks, you can absolutely achieve parity with what they're doing in the cloud if your budget is big enough. But that's right here, right now. The minute, just like with Warp announced during this week that they've created this new Oz platform for cloud-based agents, people are already going that way. And once that happens, the engineering ownership is on you to build these similar interfaces. So we're at this Goldilocks phase where on-prem might be perfect. But as they start to engineer for true autonomous agents in the cloud, I don't think on-prem is going to be able to keep up unless a company steps in and tries to keep in lockstep with the others.
Yeah, and I think the thing you mentioned around the context window is really important. Like, and this is why I think on-prem, definitely looking at kind of agentic workflows is really good, because it's kind of a single task. For instance, I've run like an NVIDIA DGX Spark on my desk. It has a ton of agents already deployed. One of them, for instance, is, as soon as we recorded this and I have the transcript, I upload the transcript to in a web form, including some details around like the title of the podcast, you as a guest, a link to your LinkedIn profile, and what the agent will do is pull more information to it and create the blog post, like a suggestion for a blog post. And the more I adjusted the prompt for a single thing, the better it got. And now the blog post is in type of, like, it learned based on my own writing skills, based on my own books I wrote in the existing blog posts. So, the model itself and the agent is really good. But as soon as I start to debate with in a chat interface about the same thing, context window gets too big and it starts hallucinating, independent of the type of model I use. And it continues to be a challenge. So I can fully relate that. Yeah,
I was
going
just gonna
on-prem
say,
has its challenges.
I was just going to say it's funny that post podcast is all going to be fed through AI to do things. What I would imagine that some of the original layout of this podcast was probably vibe coded in regards to the topics to touch on. And then before I got on this call, who do you think I was talking to nail the points that I wanted to nail on this podcast? So, like, is Skynet here? Absolutely. We're we are humans talking right now. But in 6 months, like, this might have just been exchanged between your bot and my bot.
Well, and yeah. Probably, but and still, I feel it's really good to have like an authentic conversation here, because no AI would be able to have this same authentic conversation with the same authentic connection and the anecdotes that we can share amongst each other, and share with our listeners. But yeah, like I think this is a great segue into kind of the future. I mean, in the previous podcast, already had a conversation with Tasha Drew from Broadcom around, how it's hard to predict the future, and her roadmap for the stuff that she built was based. She used the metaphor, a pudding, like a Jello pudding. It's constantly moving back and forth, so it's hard to predict the future, obviously. But from your point of view, like in 3 years from now, talking about vibe coding, what will engineers do?
So, I mean, hopefully throughout this podcast, I've tried to highlight that writing the code is the easy bit for 99% of engineers. Whether you write succinct, clever, sugar syntax code, or whether you write very, very simple, easy to read code is the onus of you and your team. In 3 years' time, I mean, I don't even want to go to 3 years. Can we go to 18 months? Because like there's so many gotchas here, right? So where we were 18 months ago versus now is just exponentially different. 18 months ago we were using GPT 3.5 Turbo, and we had a teeny weeny little context window. We now have models with million tokens, or Gemini and Claude's latest. We've identified and addressed the context window slip, and we are now, instead of trying to throw everything at a model, we are now delegating specific components into sub-agents, which manage their own context window, which allow MCP squishing of tooling, which allow squishing of responsibility, and then a feedback loop between both agents. If we follow this same strategy right now, where if we hit the law of just compute, that we can't scale these windows larger, that is the direction we're going to go. We're going to start getting very, very, very good at agents that have specific roles and tasks with specific prompts and require the tooling that they require. So in 18 months, from a developer perspective, we're still going to be planning out the architecture of applications in the enterprise world. We're going to see a number of unicorns come up between now and 18 months of what will be a CEO, one or two C-level people, and then 2 or 3 very senior engineers, front end, back end, maybe DevOps, and they're building entire products using agentic frameworks. That is where I see the next unicorns coming from, is much smaller, much more condensed experts working with AI coding to build what they need to do. Engineers are still going to require to know software patterns, software architectures, how to scale software. And sorry to pick on the Python developers, but they're going to learn pretty soon that what they wrote isn't going to scale. So, it's in 18 months to 3 years, we're going to see people lean even harder into this. Software developers will still exist. They will have a smaller role in writing the software, but the design of the product ultimately is where they need to get good at now. Any advice I'd have to software engineers out there right now? Go buy yourself a software architecture book, read it, understand it, talk to the LLMs about it, put it into Notebook LLM, and get it to give you podcasts on what defines good software architecture, particularly the parts about software architecture that are hard. 18 months, we're going to be leaning harder into this.
So do you think that this will mean that it the coming 18 months will make, if they do it, like if they use the right practices and embrace this in a good way, it'll make strong engineers and software developers stronger and the weaker ones weaker?
Correct. Any software developer starting their career now, they have 2 choices: lean hard into Claude Code or vibe coding, and they're going to stay where they are. Vibe learning is where they have to go to. Let the use the collective knowledge of the entire world that these LLMs have to educate themselves on problems, on solutions, on architectures, on programming paradigms. Those who work with AI will succeed. Those who resist AI will struggle to keep up. But you have to learn along the process. Otherwise, why couldn't you be replaced by an engine or by an agent?
I won't call us old, but you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, like we already kind of gave it away when our career started and how old we are. But one thing I don't want to generalize, but one thing I see amongst young people, especially all the ones that want to become an influencer or want to make money, a lot of money quite fast, is that some of them have an idea of an application, want to get it as fast as possible to production, so they vibe code the crap out of something, release it, and put it online. One of the risks I see there as well is that from a security perspective, we're going to see a ton of startups in the upcoming years that are bound to be impacted by hackers, by security experts who, find bugs, find malware, or include malware somewhere. It's gonna be a messy time, I guess.
100%. I mean, we've already seen it. We've seen Twitter stories of people launching their own SaaS only to be absolutely torn apart by people who found API keys in the front end code, pushing random stuff into their Supabase database and costing them a fortune. People are inherently, problematic when they're anonymous on the internet, and yes, these lessons are going to be learned the hard way. You only have to look at some of the MCP servers that have been pushed out in recent months and then really look at the code underneath them. They are one rug pull away from losing their credit card, from losing their email address details, from blasting spam out everywhere. There is so much security required around these processes that the LLM just does not provide today. And internally in ARIA, we know that well. And that's where we focus. But for those running Moltbot or Claudebot or whatever it's calling itself these days, a skilled prompt engineer like Pradeep internally, a QA guy. I always refer to Pradeep as one of the most prolific prompt hackers I've ever seen. In close to 7 minutes, he had ChatGPT explain how to make meth and dosages.
Like crystal meth.
Crystal meth. He is so good at convincing an LLM to break its guardrails that he's an asset to us because he breaks everything.
Wow.
It's not only do you have to worry about the human attack, you have to worry about the agents orchestrated by the human attack. And then silly mistakes that you may have made along the way. Things are going to get 10x harder because agents can now go and attack. And interestingly, if you do want to write red teaming agents or red teaming attacks on other platforms, guess which model is the best one for that? Which model do you think is the one model that really doesn't care if it breaks the law?
Oh, the one at X or?
Exactly. So, yeah.
Oh, man. Well, first of all, I think, Pradeep was his name?
Yes, he's amazing. I love him.
He has an open invitation to join the show and talk about prompt engineering, because that would be definitely a really cool topic to cover as well. I want to close off this section with kind of a question. Do you think that thinking or learning are kind of a new bottleneck?
100%. I think as we went through this podcast, we kind of differentiated the difference between vibe coding and vibe learning, right? Learning as you proceed to make yourself better at what you're doing in order to deliver better as a person, and use these technologies well. For vibe coders, it's a fast race to product, but the understanding along the way is going to really hold them back to scale and to almost kind of proper architecture patterns. The learning process that a human has to go through to catch up with the level of knowledge available to these models is considerable. And I don't think we can ever hold ourselves accountable to the amount of information these models can hold in context. So it's going to become about how best to use the tools, learning how best to use the tools, and learning how best to fuel your journey and your learning expedition using these tools as well.
Yeah, I think that's a massive segue into final section of the show, the lab report. I think that already, gave a great recap of what we talked about today. I think from my perspective, vibe coding is here to stay. It won't ever go away. We don't know what direction it will go into, but it is definitely here to stay. Second thing is that it is very dangerous if you don't know what you do. I mean, like, you're not going to build a car if you don't have a driver's license and expect to drive in it without, getting accidents, killing yourself. So I think it's really important if you start to do something seriously, if you want to build something seriously that will get in some form of production, either for your own company or online as your brilliant new SaaS service. I think it's really important to know the key principles around software development and make sure that the guardrails are already in place before you build something and push it into production. And the last thing, I think, like what you mentioned, it's all about learning. Don't expect to build something in a couple of minutes and just want to go to the end goal. I think with all things, the goal is important, yes, but the most important aspect is the learning and the journey towards the goal. So, and quite often that's kind of skipped and misunderstood.
Mm-hmm. Ultimately, AI is fed by all of our knowledge. Ultimately, AI will continue to repeat back what we already know. But how do we as a civilization push forward without understanding what we're doing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Dude, thanks so much for being a guest. And you also have an open invitation to come back and talk about the stuff that you do at Aria. But also, if any one of you listening or viewing have questions about vibe coding, or have another topic in mind that Andy would be a great guest to talk about, feel free to reach out below this video, or drop me a message on one of the mentioned social accounts. So for now, dude, thanks so much for being a guest. And again, you have an open invitation to come back.
I'd love to. It was really, really fun. Let's see what the engagement's like, and we can talk about it again. But I'll gladly deep dive on Aria another time. Okay.
Cool. Thanks for tuning into the Private AI Lab. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, or visit johan.ml for more insights and experiments. Experiment complete. Until the next one, stay curious. Private AI Lab.